is NBC Palm Springs.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Gino Lamont.
And I'm Sarah Sanchez. Police have 3 more suspects in the Jonathan and Audrey missing persons case. The Coachella Valley couple went missing 3 years ago. Just last month, 3 other people were arrested. One of the suspects arrested today, Erin Bernal. Our Kitty Alvarado has been following the story since the beginning. She told us Bernal was a person of interest 3 months into the investigation. She's live now with more for us tonight. Kitty.
That's right, Sarah. And Erin Bernal's name really stands out among those arrested because he went to high school with Audrey, and it's rumored that they dated, but they were friends. And now police, we learned early on that police did question Erin, and also we learned that he did some things that looked very suspicious. Well, now he's under arrest among 6 others in connection with the murders of Jonathan and Audrey. After more than 3 years, progress is being made in the baffling case of Jonathan Darling Reynoso and Audrey Moran's disappearance. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department and District Attorney's Gang Impact Team arrested more people involved in their murders. 28-year-old Erin Bernal of Indio and 31-year-old Eric Rios of Coachella were arrested for murder, and murder charges were added to 27-year-old Adeline Inez Castañeda, who was already in custody on drug charges. In total, now 6 are behind bars in connection with their murders. We reached out to private investigator Luis Bolaños, who gave us insight just months into the case. He says these arrests are good news.
Wonderful news that the case continues to move forward. To have 6 arrests on a double homicide is pretty unique.
3 months into the investigation, NBC Palm Springs broke the story that Bernal was a person of interest. A source told us Bernal was a friend of Audrey's since high school, and they may have dated. They told us he was questioned in the couple's disappearance. A search warrant had been served at a home in Coachella where he was staying, and he torched his car and reported it stolen. The sheriff's department has never confirmed those claims. Bolaño says his actions were definitely suspicious, but he wasn't arrested earlier because they wanted solid evidence.
You just realize through your investigation at that point, you don't have enough to keep him, and you realize that you need to do some more investigation, and you may be onto the right person.
He says the home where investigators searched for days in Coachella must have yielded a lot of evidence.
They were there in the second residence for a few days. That's a lot of evidence they're recovering, and a lot of digging up, excavating they're doing in the backyard.
He says he was contacted by an anonymous source a few months ago because of a story we did with him.
The only reason this anonymous tipster came to us is because they saw the stories that you did consistently on Jonathan and Audrey.
He says the information this source gave him was sent to investigators immediately and may have helped in the arrest of at least 2 of the suspects, but can't give specifics because that source is still providing information.
They were very consistent with the arrests that were made, and in those tips, whether it's one person or multiple people that sent that to us, one common thread in all those tips were they feared for their safety.
He says there will never be real justice for the families, but this is a start.
They want justice, and what they really want is their family members, their loved ones back. So this is a step in the right direction for sure.
And Bolaño says that because of the number of people arrested, he wouldn't be surprised if this is gang related. And he also says he wouldn't be surprised if more people were arrested in this case. As to the DNA results of the remains that were found several weeks ago in connection with the case, we have still not received word if these are linked to Jonathan and Audrey. Reporting live from Palm Desert, Kitty Alvarado, NBC Palm Springs.
Okay, thank you, Kitty. Investigation is underway in Coachella after a body was found this morning. Riverside County Sheriff's Department closed a half-mile stretch of Avenue 49 between Van Buren and Frederick Streets near the Rancho Las Flores development. No word yet on whether or not this will be a homicide investigation.
And we have an update on the body that was discovered in Thermal Tuesday. Officials say the man whose body was found in the area of Fillmore Street and Avenue 78 is a homicide victim. Police are actively searching for a suspect.
They're also investigating a body found inside a burned out car in Thermal. This was discovered on Pierce Street, south of Airport Boulevard. The Sheriff's Department says the medical examiners found, quote, evidence of homicidal violence, end quote. No suspects have been arrested. No word if any of these recent homicides are all connected.
A second suspect is in custody in connection to the fatal shooting on July 14th in Desert Hot Springs. Angel Arangure was arrested and is expected to appear in court later this week. Police did not say how they identified Arangure as a suspect. The first suspect, a 17-year-old teen, was arrested within 12 hours of the shooting. His name has not been released because he is a minor. No word on a motive.
The man accused of brutally attacking a 7-year-old boy in Desert Hot Springs has been charged with attempted murder. Gavin Ludwig was walking home from a pool party in his own neighborhood when police say Daniel Paulson attacked him. Gavin's family says he is improving. His breathing tube was removed and the bleeding in his brain appears to have stopped. Since 2007, though, Paulson, seen here, has been arrested and charged on 15 different occasions in Riverside County, and he has been found mentally incompetent to stand trial 11 times.
A possible blow to Cal State Palm Desert. A new report says it's not a suitable location for a future California State University based on enrollment alone. The report says the other 4 sites would not be suitable either. The Palm Desert campus meets criteria for the campus to serve the most underrepresented minorities and is the cheapest and fastest option for a campus, but looks like it's not going to happen.
Taking a live look outside now, courtesy of our Agua Caliente Casino cam. Let's check in with Chief Meteorologist Mike Everett, standing by at the AccuWeather Forecast Center. Mike.
Gino, you've seen more of that haze around the mouth of the pass. That is a sure sign of onshore flow, and that is the thing that has been driving temperatures down. Remember, we were 116 on Sunday, got ourselves down closer to the 30-year average today. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Very difficult to see, but there's actually a pair of lows, one that's parallel with the Bay Area right now that continues to push that air in off the Pacific. Does a couple things for us, keeps those temperatures regulated, keeps that monsoonal moisture well off towards the east. This is Douglas, expected to strengthen into the first hurricane of the eastern Pacific season. I'll give you all the details on that, and tracking another storm system off in the Atlantic. More on that coming up as well. In the meantime, tonight's top story were temperatures that were within 1 degree of the 30-year average. 108 is the norm. 109 is what we achieved today. We're unable to get ourselves into the 70s overnight. 81 is where we bottomed out. We'll fix that over the next couple of days, I assure you. 121 is the record for today's date, and the coolest it's ever been on this date was in 1957 when we touched down at 61. Neighborhood weather right now is showing us 107 currently at the airport. Winds are going to be gusty over the next couple of nights. Nothing worth issuing any advisories for, but we'll see them get up to about 25, 30 miles an hour. Currently coming in sustained about 16 to 18 from the northwest, and humidity down to 11%. As we roll through the rest of the night, quick cooling. By the time we get to 11 p.m., we'll be back into the 80s. We'll get ourselves into the 70s by 2 a.m., and that's going to set us up for a gorgeous start on Thursday. Not only that, but we're going to be running below average over the next couple of days. Look at that, 106 on Thursday, 107 on Friday. It's going to be a dynamite weekend, and check out those overnights. We're going to keep those in the 70s. I'll tell you how long it lasts and when you can expect it to warm again coming up.
Coronavirus coverage brought to you by East Valley COVID-19 testing site, serving residents of eastern Coachella Valley.
California records its highest number of new COVID-19 cases in a single day. The state has now surpassed New York for the most total cases in the country. 13,000 cases were reported today alone. Riverside County has the 17th highest number of confirmed cases in the nation. Los Angeles County is shattering grim milestones for hospitalizations and deaths. The mayor there says LA is on the brink of another shutdown.
Governor Newsom holds his own coronavirus briefing today, announcing personal care businesses can move their operations outdoors in order to stay open. He also updated the number of counties on the state's watch list. Now 33 of California's 58 counties are on that watch list. And we here in Riverside County have been on the list since the beginning.
Yesterday, we had 12,807 individuals that were tested positive for COVID-19. 12,807 represents the highest reported number in our state.
Florida still holds the record for most daily cases in one state with 15,000. California has now passed New York with the most coronavirus cases in the country with more than 413,000 cases.
Let's take a look at the latest COVID-19 numbers from Riverside County and the entire Coachella Valley. Almost 1,100 new cases were reported in Riverside County today. Nearly 300 of those were just from our desert. 28 new deaths were reported countywide, 12 of those from the Coachella Valley.
Help is on the way for California cities as $500 million federal dollars are being distributed to help cope with severe financial losses. But here in the Coachella Valley, the news isn't as good. City leaders are outraged that they're being cut out of their fair share, and now they're fighting back. Daytona Everett has their story. So Daytona, what exactly is the problem?
Gino, there's a shared frustration from Palm Springs Mayor Jeff Kors and Assemblyman Chad Mays. They're wondering why a resident in Riverside is worth so much more than a resident in Palm Springs, according to the CARES Act funding. The state says it's all due to population, but these local leaders, they aren't buying it.
In a time where everyone is strapped for cash, the relief money from the CARES Act is falling flat for the Coachella Valley.
And the state decided, in their wisdom, to give the 13 largest cities between $85 and $174 per full-time resident, and the rest of us $12 per full-time resident. It's totally unfair.
Unfair and rushed, according to Assemblyman Chad Mays.
This is power politics at its worst. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's really big cities versus small cities. It's urban areas versus suburban and rural areas.
The state put together the CARES Act, giving the bulk of the money to the 13 largest cities. Cities with at least 300,000 residents. That's a threshold none of the Coachella Valley cities meet.
And it's really causing problems for cities like ours.
If I was to tell you that you're going to be getting far less than the same type of business that's down the street in Riverside, what would you say?
Well, it doesn't make any sense. It's completely unfair. And, we have employees. They're just as valuable as the employees down the road.
Destination PSP, its name, self-explanatory, relies on tourism. So they need the help.
How desperate are you to get that relief?
We are extremely desperate.
So it's incumbent upon me, it's incumbent upon all of us as elected officials, local elected officials that represent small cities, to advocate and say enough's enough. We need to make sure that we get our fair share.
We reached out to the governor's office multiple times but haven't received a response. Assemblyman Mays says he's advocating for a special session to deal with all things related to the pandemic. And Mayor Kors has actually been in communication with the White House about funding. We'll, of course, continue to update you here on NBC Palm Springs. And Daytona Everett.
Joining us now, the mayor of the city of Palm Springs, Jeff Kors. Mr. Mayor, thank you for being here tonight. So I think in a nutshell, we could say that the city's not real pleased with the allocation of funds coming from the state. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I think that's a fair characterization. So the state is giving $500 million that it received to give cities in CARES Act funding from the federal government. And the state decided, in their wisdom, to give the 13 largest cities between $85 and $174 per full-time resident, and the rest of us $12 per full-time resident. So that means, just to give you an example, Palm Springs is 7 times smaller than the city of Riverside, yet Riverside received 50 times more funding, $600,000 to $28 million. And that's happening in cities throughout the state. The group of 13 big cities who work and lobby together are getting a way disproportionate share of the funding. And it's really causing problems for cities like ours.
Yeah, you guys have sent a letter to the governor himself. Any hope that it's going to have any effect on the decision at all?
I am hopeful. I'm working with a coalition of mayors. We're now working to build a coalition of the more than 400 cities and mayors who aren't in the Big 13, who has gotten the disproportionate share of the funding. And we're going to do a sign-on letter. We've reached out to our legislators. I've talked to Assemblymember Mays. I've reached out to Senator Melendez. We need them to organize the members of the Senate and Assembly who represent the 72% of people who aren't in those 13 cities. And they need to start really being vocal with us to demand that the next set of funding makes up this difference. It's not okay. And, look at per capita homelessness. Look at the public safety costs. We're probably doing more enforcement than almost any city I'm aware of, yet we're not getting money to do it when other cities are getting their full deficits refilled.
Right.
That's really unacceptable.
Yeah, and then should they take into account at all the fact that tourism-based businesses were the hardest hit of all businesses, at least in the state of California?
Yeah, of course they should. And that's how the state makes money. And we highlight that in the letter. The state makes a lot of money from tourism. It's a huge industry. 53,000 Coachella Valley residents are employed by tourism and hospitality. And they're really suffering. And we need to be able to help them and help those businesses. So that's what I'm talking about when we talk about the loss for each city. That's what they should be funding ideally, is what have the cities lost in revenue directly related to this emergency and enforcing the state orders.
All right. Mayor of Palm Springs, Jeff Kors, best of luck with your fight with the governor. And
Thank you.
Please,
I'm sure it'll be very nice and civil.
Of course.
We need to get attention, so thank you for covering this.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll be right back.
Take care.
Riverside County Health Officer Dr. Cameron Kaiser will speak at tomorrow's Palm Springs City Council meeting. He will give the most recent data and weigh in on whether modifications to existing orders are needed in Palm Springs. An update on enforcement in the city will also be discussed during the meeting.
Discussions over small business relief continues, but several local companies say it's simply too late. Muscle Works in Palm Desert officially shut its doors today. The owners of the gym say even with eviction moratoriums in place, they're simply unable to pay rent on the back end. The Greater Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce says these closures affect more than just that single small business.
We know that money that is spent locally on small businesses, that money tends to stay within the valley. It gets recirculated. As opposed to money that may go into national chains or big box, that money tends to leave the valley and we don't necessarily see it again.
The chamber offers information on their website for struggling small businesses. The president says they're continuously applying for more financial aid. When we come back, new tonight, we're going to go one-on-one with Peter Lee. He's the executive director of Covered California to talk about insurance enrollment and coverage in COVID era. And what about those vaccines? Will those be covered? We're going to find out. And we're going to hear from both sides of the aisle as senators debate over extending the weekly unemployment benefits, which are set to run out in about a week.
Plus, what are negative interest rates? Well, they've never happened in the U.S. before, but some experts expect they will soon. Details on what it means later in the show. And the pandemic is taking a toll on everyone's mental health. We know that, but it's been especially tough for our kids. Tips on how to help our kids cope through the summer coming up.
Joining us now is Peter Lee, the executive director of Covered California. Mr. Lee, thank you for joining us this evening.
Great to be with you today.
You were quoted in the New York Times as saying that this pandemic is the first test of the Affordable Care Act. So with that in mind, How are we doing from the insurance standpoint of this pandemic?
I think we're doing pretty well. And what I meant by that quote was, for the first 6-7 years after the Affordable Care Act, we had a strong economy. We had record low unemployment, and we did a great job bringing down the rate of the uninsured. But we saw with this pandemic, millions of Californians losing their jobs and many losing job-based coverage. Covered California has opened our doors wide open, have hundreds of thousands of people literally who've gotten coverage during this period of a pandemic. And that's what we're there for. And that's what we're reaching out to make sure people know that if they've lost job-based coverage, come to Covered California. We can help them get signed up or maybe get Medi-Cal.
Let's talk about this. Let's be honest. Nobody in the history of mankind has ever felt sorry for an insurance company. But you guys have to be absolutely overloaded with literally every man, woman, and child in the state wanting to get tested, whether they have symptoms or not.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, is that the cost of COVID are costs that we are all going to bear one way or another. Some of it's baked into our health insurance premiums. Some of it's in Medicaid. Some of it's in federal spending. And I think what we need to all be doing, whether it's an insurance company, Covered California, making our insurance companies are doing the right thing, is meet the healthcare needs. And one of the things that I want to give tip my hat, some to the insurance companies, but really to the doctors, nurses, and hospitals out there. One of the things we've seen is a huge upsurge in people getting healthcare from their homes, telehealth, virtual health. And that's really important, because if you don't need to go into a doctor's office, but you can see them like I'm seeing you now from Zoom from my home, that's a great thing. And we've seen every one of our health plans is paying for those visits. And huge numbers of people are getting care they need. And that's one of the things I want to remind people in Riverside County and across the state is COVID is something to worry about. But if you've got other symptoms, go to your doctor. But that go-to might be on a Zoom meeting. It might be by phone, but people shouldn't be hesitating, thinking about, is that a lump I need to worry about? Is that asthma I need to get checked? Am I a diabetic that I'm not sure about my symptoms? People have a lot of healthcare issues. We can't let the pandemic get California tripped up in making sure Californians get the right care for everything they need.
Let's talk a little bit about the cost. Now, looking at next year, where we hope that to have a vaccine in place, is a vaccine likely going to be covered by our insurance in general, or Covered California specifically?
Yeah, there's no question that if a vaccine is medically necessary and appropriate, bam, it will absolutely be covered. But we're also seeing the federal government doing prepayment for vaccines to the tune of more than $1 billion for some major pharmaceutical companies, based on those vaccines being free in America. And this comes back to the theme of we're going to pay for it one way or another. But if you've got coverage through Covered California, no question, if a vaccine costs $20 or $100, it's going to be a covered benefit.
Practically since the day the ACA was passed, the Republican Party has been trying to smash it, to end it, to reduce it. The only thing that the Trump administration has been successful in doing is getting rid of the individual mandate. How much does it hurt our chance for affordable coverage by not making sure that every American has health insurance?
Well, I got to tell you, I need to remind you, and I know you know this, but last year, and it feels like 100 years ago, but starting in 2020, the year we're in, California passed an individual mandate law. So in California, we brought back what was a core element, not the be all and end all, but a core element of the individual mandate. Because of that, in 2020, we had a huge bump in our enrollment. Also because California put new state subsidies in place, helping middle-class Californians get financial help for their subsidies, for their healthcare costs. That was going beyond the Affordable Care Act. And I think our lesson is really clear for the nation, that when you lean in and protect the ACA by having a penalty, which no one likes penalties, just like no one likes to wear a mask. But it's the same philosophy. We all do better if everyone's insured. We all do better if everyone wears a mask. It protects you, it protects your neighbors. That's what the penalty is about. I think that the nation will need to pause after this pandemic and look at how do we build on something that's working for tens of millions of Americans, rather than play this endless game of political whack-a-mole, of trying to sort of avoid the substance of getting all Americans health care versus playing political games.
All right. Peter Lee, Executive Director of Covered California. Thank you, sir, for a fascinating and certainly broad interview covering a lot of ground. Thank you for your time.
Great to be with you. Thanks much. Be well and be safe.
Thank you, sir.
We'll be right back after the break with a look at the forecast. Mike is standing by.
Hi, Sarah. I got a gorgeous live look at the sunset, courtesy of our Agua Caliente Casino Cam. You know, this thing has kept us excessively hot over the last couple of weekends. That will not be the case this weekend. We'll discuss that in the tropics when we come back.
All right, time now for a check on our weather. And last I looked, it was summer outside.
I think it still is, Gino.
Yeah?
It's hot, but it's not that hot. You know what I mean?
It's hot.
I guess I'm used to it.
Hot is hot, but in relative terms, as I was mentioning, we were going into the commercial. You remember 2 weekends ago, we hit the 120 mark. In fact, 121 was our official high at Palm Springs International. Last weekend on Sunday, we were 116. And then since then, it's all been downhill. Well, we've got a pair of low pressure systems that are helping to regulate temperatures going into the weekend. This one's going to be really, really good. I'll show it to you in a moment. We saw that Walter Clark cam with a little bit of fair weather cumulus over the mountains. We will talk more about that in a moment as well. Tonight's top story, or one of them, is an active Eastern Pacific hurricane. Now, this is the latest that we've ever had a hurricane form in the Eastern Pacific. It's Douglas. It will hit Category 1 strength later this evening and could possibly ramp up to a Cat 3. The thing about this one is it's headed straight towards the Hawaiian Islands. Now, latest forecast model runs expect it to weaken by the time it gets close to Hawaii. And we're not talking about a direct impact yet. We'll have to keep a very close eye on it. If anything does happen, it would be on Sunday. Still, it looks like they're going to get a lot of wind and a lot of rain out of the deal, and we'll keep a very, very close eye on that. Meanwhile, Gonzalo in the Atlantic has set another record. This is the earliest that a 7th named storm has ever happened in that particular basin. It is expected to strengthen even up to a Category 1 storm. The good news with this one is it looks like it will leave Puerto Rico alone. Goodness knows they don't need any more bad news there. Now, it will make its way into the Gulf of Mexico, where there's some very warm water waiting for it, and it has the probability of strengthening into a hurricane once again there. Again, if anything does happen, we're more than a week out, but it's another thing that we're watching. Meanwhile, we've got something very subtle happening. You have to look very closely to see it, but a very weak low pressure system is forming almost parallel with the Bay Area. It continues to keep that flow on shore, kept the marine layer thick along the coast today, and there's some very cool water temperatures there as well. I'm getting some reports of 55 degree water there, so a lot of folks who have been heading to the beaches to get some refreshment have been finding some over refreshment there. Meanwhile, monsoonal flow continues to come up from the south towards the north. It's bringing some showers into Arizona, New Mexico, and into parts of Colorado, and then just across the southeast, it's just wow. It's warm, it's muggy, and there's a lot of moisture there firing some afternoon storms down the Florida Peninsula. Meanwhile, closer to home, things very pleasant. That marine layer kept things cool today along the coast. Look at that, currently 71 in LA. They hit 82 yesterday, so some big changes there. 70 in San Diego, currently 106 here, 107 in Havasu. That looks like our warm spot right now. 106 in Phoenix, 105 currently in Yuma. We will cool very efficiently tonight. By the time you join us again at 11, we'll already be in the 80s, and look at that, tucking into the upper 70s by 2 a.m. It's going to start us off with a relatively cool start on Thursday. Look at this. Now, we will warm as we go into the afternoon. We are a desert and it is summer, but we'll be 2 degrees below average in Palm Springs, 108 in Indio, and 98 in Joshua Tree. And great news, as I mentioned earlier, your Comfort Air 7-day forecast shows us staying in that very temperate range through the weekend. Take advantage. It gets hot again next week, 114 on Wednesday.
Senate Republicans are considering a short-term extension of enhanced federal unemployment benefits. The current $600 a week federal payment is scheduled to expire soon, but many GOP lawmakers claim the weekly benefit is overly generous and gives people a reason not to work. Senate Democrats blast that notion.
Eventually, we want to get to a place where people aren't being paid more not to work than to work.
They do not have the view of the scope. When Mitch McConnell says a month ago, when 20 million people are out of work, 25 million people are out of work, that millions of businesses are going under, let's assess the situation, that says they're out of touch.
Some Republican senators say they support a smaller weekly benefit with an extension through the end of the year.
A third of Americans took a hit to their credit scores during this pandemic. The Bankrate.com survey found 1/3 either added to their debt, paid a bill late, carried a balance, or didn't pay a bill at all, or canceled a card specifically to try to improve that credit score. Only 13% of car holders say they worry their credit score is going to take a hit.
Negative interest rates have never existed in the U.S., but some investors are betting they will. You're basically loaning the bank money so they pay you interest. When you take money out of the bank, you pay them interest. But what happens if rates go below zero?
If the interest rate is negative, retail banks have to pay interest to the central bank, and that cost can get passed on to the consumer.
That means, in theory, you might have to pay the bank for the privilege of holding your money, but some banks may still absorb that cost instead of passing it on to you.
Still to come, we're going to revisit tonight's top stories, including new arrests made in the 3-year-old case of the missing couple. And Palm Springs is getting less relief money from the state than they want. They'll tell you why.
And the pandemic is taking a toll on everyone's mental health, but it's been especially tough for kids. Tips on how to help your kids cope through the rest of the summer coming up. Riverside County Sheriff's Department and District Attorney's Gang Impact Team arrest 3 more people involved in the murders of Jonathan Reynoso and Audrey Moran. The couple went missing more than 3 years ago. 28-year-old Aaron Bernal of Indio and 31-year-old Eric Rios of Coachella were arrested for murder, and murder charges were added to 27-year-old Adeline Castaneda, who was already in custody on unrelated drug charges. In total, 6 are now behind bars in connection with the murders. We reached out to private investigator Luis Bolaños, who gave us insight just months into the case.
Wonderful news that the case continues to move forward. To have 6 arrests on a double homicide is pretty unique. It proves to me that the Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney's Office have been working this case meticulously and feverishly for almost 3 years now.
NBC Palm Springs first broke the story just months into the case that Bernal was a person of interest. A source told us there was a search warrant served on a home in Coachella where Bernal was living, and he torched his car and reported it missing. That's what our source tells us. The sheriff's department, though, has not verified these claims.
Help is on the way for cities across California hit hard by the coronavirus, as $500 million federal dollars are being distributed to help cope with severe financial losses. Great news, right? Well, not here in the Coachella Valley, where city leaders are outraged that they're being cut out of what they call their fair share. The funding gives the 13 largest cities in the state between $85 and $174 per person, while cities like Palm Springs are getting $12 a person.
So it's incumbent upon me, it's incumbent upon all of us as elected officials, local elected officials that represent small cities, to advocate and say enough's enough. We need to make sure that we get our fair share.
Assemblyman Chad May says he's advocating for a special session to deal with all things related to the pandemic. Meanwhile, Palm Springs Mayor Jeff Kors says he's teaming up with other mayors from smaller cities to request more equal funding.
Taking a live look now from our Agua Caliente Casino cam in Rancho Mirage. Warm out there this evening. I'm getting made fun of because I said it's not hot. It's July. We do get used to it. Don't we, Mike? I mean, we do. We have to build up some tolerance to it.
Absolutely, and it's all relative when you think about it. The last 2 weekends in a row, going back 2 weeks, that was that weekend that we hit the 120-degree mark. In fact, 121 is what we achieved at Palm Springs International. Last Sunday, we were 116, so to come in around 108, 109 today is actually quite nice, and I would technically call that warm. We know what hot is here in the desert. Take a look at Futurecast. We got a couple things that are keeping temperatures regulated, and by the way, if you're an early riser, next couple of mornings are going to be your thing. I'll show you those numbers in a moment. Take a look at Futurecast. We've got a low pressure system that's so weak it's really hard to identify, basically parallel with the Bay Area right now, and another one pushing in behind that is going to keep us in a very nice range going into the weekend. Here's what we're looking at as far as monsoonal flow goes. That weak low pressure continues to keep all of that moisture well off towards the east and the humidity as well, and for this we are thankful. That could change next week, but that's a next week problem. Take a look at future winds. It's gusty out there. You take any one of these numbers here and add about 10 to it, and that's where our gusts will be this evening, so we will get up to about 30 miles an hour, especially up towards the northern end of the valley here, up to about 25 miles an hour in Palm Desert, especially along I-10. Obviously, the later that it gets, the weaker that it'll become. So by the time we get to midnight tonight, we'll get everything back into single digits, and we'll start Thursday off with that light easterly flow that once again becomes northwest. Looks like we'll be gusty again tomorrow night as well. 106 currently at the airport. We got some pretty decent winds happening there and humidity at 10%. But here's the big story. The next 3 days brought to you by Comfort Air shows temperatures below average by day. And look at those overnights. We're going to hit the low 70s on Thursday morning. I'll tell you how long this streak lasts coming up.
All right, thanks, Mike. Well, back in May, you could have heard about some buzz about an app that would help us track and slow the spread of coronavirus. But months later, technical roadblocks are slowing the launch of these apps, and it's unclear how effective they would ever be, even once they were released.
The problem is that middle of a pandemic is not a time to be figuring out fundamentally new ways of doing public health.
Another issue with these apps is they rely heavily on voluntary participation, something that's been in short supply during the pandemic.
When we come back, the pandemic is taking a toll on everyone's mental health, but it's been especially tough for our kids. We'll have tips on how to help your kids cope. That's coming up. The coronavirus continues to take a toll on the well-being of children and young adults. While studies suggest they're less likely to get infected with the virus than adults, they're experiencing major life changes and stressors impacting their mental health. Sarah Dolph has our story.
Disrupted routines, separation from friends, and for many, no in-person school come fall. The pandemic is wearing on the mental health of children and teens.
About 1 in 6 children in America have a mental health disorder. And in the context of the coronavirus pandemic, we expect this to increase.
Across the board, health experts are seeing more symptoms of anxiety and depression. In younger kids, that may manifest as tantrums or behavior regression. Older children may be more agitated, angry, or withdrawn. Having a trusted adult to walk kids through those emotions is key.
Name the feeling for them. I see that you're angry that you can't hang out with your friends right now, or you're really worried that something bad is going to happen to mom when I go to work. So help them identify those feelings and then help them with ways to work through that and build resilience.
While most kids will remember the pandemic, like how their grandparents and great-grandparents recalled the Depression, it won't interfere with their development. But kids with pre-existing mental health conditions are at heightened risk. A survey of 2,000 young people with mental health histories in the UK found 51% reported coronavirus has made their mental health a bit worse. 32% say it's made it much worse.
We know that those children are at higher risk for developing longer-term psychological impact from the pandemic.
Even during the summer, health experts say establishing routines and structure can help. So can time outdoors and time with family or chatting with friends via social media. Watch for changes to appetite and sleeping habits, as well as personalities. Big shifts are signs it's time to connect with a mental health expert. Sarah Dolph, NBC News.
And experts say children tend to do better when adults are doing better. So make sure you're doing your best to model healthy coping behaviors during the pandemic. Coming up after the break, Mike has a look at our forecast. Mike.
Hi, Sarah. Temperatures are going to be doing a lot better as we go into the weekend, tracking a pair of lows that are going to keep us regulated. Details on that and all your full forecast when we come back. Welcome back. Well, here's a live look for you, courtesy of our Walter Clark Cam 111 in all its glory. Some beautiful blue sky out there, just some light cloud cover just to give it a little bit of atmosphere. We are doing very well for this time of year. It's not unusual for us to be in this range. In fact, 2006, 121 was where we were. So 109 in relative terms, not bad at all. In fact, 1 degree above average. In the overnights, we weren't able to cool it as much as we could. 81 is where we got to. 78 is the 30-year average for today's date. Looks like we're going to fix that overnight tonight. We are tracking a very cool start to Thursday. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Here's what we are looking at. It's a very weak low pressure system that is keeping us regulated, keeping all that monsoonal flow off towards the east, and another trough associated with a low up towards the north and west will keep us in that range through the weekend. So if you enjoy this type of weather, well, we've got a few more days of it before things heat up next week. Here's what's interesting to me right now is, remember, we were warm along the coast yesterday. LA got to about 82, 83 degrees, currently 71 there, and I'm getting reports that the ocean temperature is also very cool. There are a lot of folks who have been heading into the water have been coming right back out again when they encounter 55-degree temperatures, something we haven't seen in a good long while. Meanwhile, inland, obviously it's warmer. We've got 106s in Phoenix and here in Palm Springs, 105 in Havasu and Yuma, 104 up towards Vegas, 97 in Bakersfield, and a chilly 65 out towards Santa Barbara. We are going to cool very efficiently tonight. In fact, what you'll notice is by the time we get to 11 p.m., already in the 80s, getting ourselves into the 70s by 2 a.m. That's something we haven't done for a few days. And look at where we start tomorrow. We will be in the low 70s. We will warm in the afternoon. We get to 103 by 2 p.m., but 106 by 4 p.m. and some low dew points. It's going to be a warm, dry, wonderful day and 2 degrees below average in Palm Springs, 108 in Palm Desert and in Indio. You'll find some upper 90s in Joshua Tree. Nice. 96 in Cabazon and 75 in Big Bear. Your Comfort Air 7-day forecast shows us continuing this trend into the weekend. We finally start to warm up next week. In fact, high pressure builds across the region starting Tuesday and puts us back in the 110s again next week.
For the first time, Kim Kardashian West is speaking out about her husband's struggles with bipolar disorder. In a series of tweets, Kardashian West asked for understanding, compassion, and privacy for her husband. Her tweets came a few hours after Kanye was on social media ranting about his wife and mother-in-law, Kris Jenner. Those tweets have since been deleted. We'll be right back.
Winter Side of the News is brought to you by Holland RV, located off the I-10 at Washington.
Well, the Los Angeles Dodgers and Mookie Betts have reportedly agreed to terms to a mega contract extension that will keep Mookie and every relative he ever has comfortable for the foreseeable future. The deal, worth $380 million over the next 13 seasons. Betts is a World Series champ, a former AL MVP. He's also got 4 Gold Gloves, 3 Silver Sluggers. The Dodgers did not want to risk losing Mookie after the trading for him last year in the offseason.
I like all those cardboard cutouts. Gina, are you over there?
I am.
Oh, there you go. Well, scan this code. Get more of this online. See you tonight.